That was pretty fun, wasn't it? What is up, everyone? My name is Zach Sopak, and I'm a content creator living in Southern California, and I want to help you take your creativity to the next level with tips, tricks, tutorials, reviews, and more. Today, we're going to be breaking down this B-roll sequence that you just watched, and I'm going to give you some tips and tricks on how to be able to do similar shots for your very own projects. There are a bunch of these kinds of videos out on social media and YouTube right now, but I wanted to put my own spin on it. And if you know me, then you know that one of my most favorite things in the whole wide world is coffee. And my friends over at Jack Henry Co. just came out with their very own line of coffee, and they were kind enough to send me a couple of bags. So as a way of celebrating and a way of giving back to them, I created this B-roll sequence that you just saw. So I want to jump into this sequence and give you some tips and little tricks that you can do in the editing. But the first tip that I'm actually going to give you has nothing to do with the editing process or even the shooting process itself. It's just simply having a plan. Planning your shots is very important because it gives you a roadmap that you can use as a guide for when you're shooting. If nothing else, you need to know what's your starting point, what's your end point, and how are you going to get there. And don't think to yourself, oh, I don't want to just have a plan, I want to be free. You can still be free. It's just nice to have a little bit of a structure to your shots so that way you don't leave anything out in the process. The next tip that I'm going to give you is to use keyframes to add movements to your shots. I use keyframes in a majority of these shots because I wanted there to be a little bit of movement and excitement to it instead of just having stationary angles is not always the most exciting thing to look at, especially when we're talking about epic B-roll. In the example of this coffee video, I was actually shooting it all by myself. The camera was locked off either on a tripod or I was doing a little bit of handheld action for a little bit of a POV type of feel. But I used keyframes all over this to either draw in attention or to accentuate certain movements of the clips. Let me play for you right now a few of the clips from this video without keyframes and then with keyframes. The next tip that I'm going to give you is to use different frame rates in your footage. I know. You're saying, Zach, you don't want me to just shoot 120 frames per second for every single clip forever and ever, amen? No, because here's the thing. Not everything needs to be shot in 120 frames per second. I know. You're thinking like, dude, you're crazy. I have to have that buttery 120 action, slow motion, blah, blah, blah. No, you don't really need that in every single shot of your sequence. Now, did I use it in this? Yeah, some, not all of it though. The way that I think of slow motion is that I like to use it to draw attention to certain subjects, or I like to use it to obviously capture motion that is happening very fast. So when I'm pouring the coffee beans out or when the grinder is grinding up the beans, that's fast movement that 24 frames per second just really wouldn't do justice because I want to show those little fine details happening. But you don't need 120 frames per second for opening the bag, for ripping it open, or even for drinking the coffee there at the end. When you use different frame rates, it's going to give it a little bit more variety into your shots, and it's going to look a bit more professional because you didn't just set it and repeat it on 120 frames per second and let it rip. You're putting a little bit more thought into it, and it's going to show and stand out. The next tip that I'm going to give you is to use sound effects in your B-roll sequences. Now, I will be the first to admit that I didn't think using sound effects was really worth it. I mean, I used to just shoot B-roll sequences and I would edit to the music so that everything was falling on the beat, like I feel like you should. But I noticed that compared to some other people's B-roll sequences, mine just kind of fell flat. And I realized that the difference was that they were using really good sound effects and I was using none. When you use sound effects in your footage, it just takes everything to a whole nother level because you're not just giving the visual experience, but you're giving the audio experience as well. So it helps people to get more immersed into your sequence. But you may be thinking like, oh, Zach, I don't want to do that. It's too much, or I don't have the money for stock sound effects or anything. And that's okay. You actually don't even really need to do that much work. If you already have a shotgun microphone that you use for videos, all you have to do is just bring that with you on whatever you're shooting. And depending on the environment that you're shooting in, you can already have the sound effects that you need baked into your camera footage. And I did that a lot in this video. So when I'm ripping open the bag, that's actually the sound of me ripping open the bag. When I'm pouring the coffee beans, that's actually sound from me pouring coffee beans into the grinder. You hear the sound of the grinder, you hear the sound of the water pouring into the coffee beans inside of the filter. All of these little sound details really add to your entire sequence, and it helps it to stand out above the rest. Now, of course, there are some things like those cinematic whooshes. I guess it's got an H. Is it like a silent H? Whoosh? Or is it whoosh? I don't know, but you have those cinematic whooshes. Those aren't things that I'm making in camera. Those are things that I've found online for free. There's actually quite a few of them out there. So if you Google search it, I'm sure you're gonna find a bunch of cinematic whooshes that are gonna help add some flavor to your sequence. But there's also a lot of really good built-in sound effects, at least here in Final Cut Pro 10. I used some built-in steam sound. I used liquid drops for when the coffee was dripping. And I also did that drinking sound effect. I didn't do that. That was actually built into Final Cut. So you can use a lot of really great sound effects that are actually built into your software. And as an example of what the different sound effects make in your footage, I'm going to show you an example of what the sequence looks and sounds like without sound effects and then with sound effects. The last tip that I'm gonna give you is to just have fun. Like, I know, yeah, Zach, have fun. Wow, so insightful. But seriously, just have fun. Get creative with the way that you tell your stories. I know that I mentioned before having like a map or a road map on how you're gonna tell the story from point A to point B, but that doesn't mean that you can't have some detours in your plan. There are a lot of things in here that I didn't necessarily plan on doing by the time I went there to go film. It's just when the inspiration struck, I just went for it. So go ahead and take some risk. Have some fun doing some things different. You wouldn't know it from seeing it in this clip, but when I do that big pour with the coffee beans, my counter, my kitchen floor was completely bombarded with this little brown army of coffee beans on the floor. My wife was like, "What the heck are you doing?" But I was like, "Babe, it's okay. It's just for the shot." Like, do stuff like that. Just have fun telling the story. If you make a mess, you make a mess. Clean it up. There's always the next shot. Well, hey, I really hope that you got some value out of this video. If you did, why don't you add some value right back to it by hitting that like button? Really helps out a lot. And also consider subscribing to this channel for more regular content just like this. And please hit that notification bell so that way you get notified every single time that I post a new video. I want to see the type of stuff that you're creating. Why don't you connect with me on Instagram? That's the best way to get in touch with me. I would love to see what it is that you're creating. We can help each other out in this whole creative process together. I'm excited for you. I'm excited for myself because I got some coffee waiting in the other room. Yeah, it might be nighttime, but that's okay. Hey, my name is Sopak. I will see you in the next video. Peace.